Hello, everybody. Can you hear me properly? Yeah. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. My name is Dirk Segar. I'm the Director of Communications of the International Federation of the Red Cross, Red Crescent and Red Crescent Societies, the IFRC, the largest humanitarian network in the world. We don't only have national societies in just about every country around the world, but we have as many as 165,000 local branches, about 14 million volunteers, 500,000 staff. And what that means is that we have a unique ability to witness the impact of climate change on communities around the world. Because we have a presence not in just in every country, but in almost every city, almost every town, almost every community. And we see that impact on people now, not in the future, but right now. So the climate crisis really is a humanitarian emergency. So with that, I have the great pleasure to introduce our president of the IFRC, Francesco Rocca, to give a statement on the report. And then after that, we'll go to Julie Arrighi. She is an advisor of the IFRC Climate Center, as well as one of the primary authors of this report, and she will go over the report itself. With that, I would like to give the floor to our president, Mr. Rocca.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much to be here with us today. Every day, I hear a story of the suffering caused by the humanitarian impacts of climate change in communities across the world. Our Red Cross and Red Crescent volunteers speak of parched landscapes after recurrent droughts and families' crops, homes and livelihoods washed away by floods and cyclones. I hear of islands, communities under threat, of needless deaths during heat waves in major world cities. We are facing a climate crisis, and we are experiencing firsthand what does it mean climate change and its impact on community, especially on the most poor and vulnerable. And I would like to use this occasion just to salute and welcome in New York to our young volunteers coming from Tuvalu, Micronesia, and Costa Rica and Italy. They will join the Youth Summit on climate change to make our voice heard and the voice of our young people. We have millions of volunteers all around the world, and many of them, as the colleagues coming from Tuvalu and Micronesia, they are really experiencing on the ground when we talk about, in an abstract way, they are living on a daily basis the consequences of climate change. And today we would like to grab your attention on the humanitarian cost of this climate crisis in the next decades, and in particular on the cost of doing nothing. The report we are presenting today is the first attempt to assess the current and future cost of the humanitarian response to climate-related crises. For the first time, we can see just how much worse things could get. But the analysis also demonstrates that it doesn't have to. We can see the cost of doing nothing, but also the chance, the imperative to do something. For example, through reducing long-term vulnerability and exposure, anticipating disasters, improve early warning system, and rebuilding and repairing with the next emergency in mind. Let me give you some figures that you will find in the report. By 2050, 200 million people every year could need international humanitarian aid as a result of a cruel combination of climate-related disaster and the socio-economic impact of the climate change. This is nearly twice the estimated 180 million people who need help today from the international humanitarian system because of floods, storms, droughts, and wildfires. And even by 2030, which is only a decade away, this number could increase almost 50%. And if we let the number of people in need increase, there will be a hefty price tag. Today, resources are already insufficient to provide very basic support to everyone who needs assistance after climate-related disaster. Depending on the amount of support provided and the source of cost estimates, meeting current needs costs international funders 3.5 to 12 billion per year. By 2030, this funding requirement could balloon to 20 billion per year. And these figures are the result of an analysis by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society and leading climate scientists scientists, and economists. They illustrate a potential cost of doing nothing to help societies adapt to climate change. And while there is a clear cost of doing nothing, there is also a chance to do something. While we cannot prevent storms and cyclones and heat waves and other climate and weather-related hazards from happening, we can do something about the impacts they have. There are measures that can be introduced to make development more inclusive and to better reduce the risk and manage climate-related disaster. It is crucial to invest in climate adaptation and to build resilience in the communities, countries, and the regions at risk. By helping communities and countries to prepare and adapt, the number of people in need of humanitarian assistance will drop, along with the amount of money needed by the international humanitarian organization. Mitigating climate change by reducing carbon emission is critical. However, even if we were to cut our emission to zero tomorrow, the world will continue to warm for decades, and sea levels will rise for many centuries. Therefore, as well as mitigating climate change, adapting to it is indispensable if we are to continue to thrive in a warming world. With determined and ambitious action, the number of people in need of international humanitarian assistance as a result of climate-related disasters annually could also be as low as 68 million by 2030, and even drop to 10 million by 2050, a decrease of 90% compared to today. These differences show that rapid, inclusive, and climate and disaster risk-informed development can significantly reduce both climate change impacts and the cost of humanitarian aid. More importantly, by protecting people from the predictable and severe consequences of climate change, unnecessary and acceptable human suffering will be reduced, and countless lives will be saved. We are not even presenting the worst scenario possible. On the contrary, these figures are also likely to be underestimates. This is because many factors that will contribute to the future humanitarian needs and costs have been omitted. For example, the analysis omits the cost of long-term recovery from disasters, focusing instead only on the immediate relief. It also doesn't account for the potential added cost of responding to climate shocks in areas affected by conflict. Furthermore, these estimates focus on international humanitarian assistance and do not include the large financial and human costs of disaster which are managed domestically by governments, insurance companies, and other resources. Consequently, the real cost of doing nothing is likely to be even higher than the estimates presented here. We all know the cost of doing nothing is far too high. So now is the time to take urgent action, knowing that through doing something we can save the lives, livelihoods, and dignity of millions of people. Humanitarian organizations cannot do everything alone. We need governments on board before it is too late. And we are calling on all of them today during this press conference, tomorrow from Bahamas, where I will go for a field visit to highlight the work of our volunteers and the huge increase of natural disasters due to climate change at the Climate Summit and during the next UNGA. We have a common humanitarian imperative to save lives and avoid suffering caused by the climate crisis. And tomorrow, really, I'm looking forward to meet with our volunteers, colleagues, and staff that are working around the clock. And this is the perfect example of the kind of consequences that can be avoided with a different approach to the climate-related disaster. So thank you for being here. For us, it's extremely important. And please, of course, when we talk about the cost of doing nothing, when we present this kind of report, we are always talking about big numbers. But behind these big numbers, there are millions of human beings. Each of them deserves respect. And every single action that can be taken by the governments and the political leaders can protect the dignity of these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Rocca, for your statement. And I would like to give the floor to Julie.
Okay, use this one.
Yes, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. By 2050, at least 200 million people could be in need of international humanitarian aid. That's a key takeaway message from this report, and one of the more pessimistic scenarios, or the pessimistic scenario in this report. In the nearer term, by 2030, just the cost of international humanitarian aid could balloon to $20 billion per year, a significant increase from the annual costs today. This report includes a number of scenarios. As I said, that's the pessimistic scenario. The optimistic scenario shows that with urgent action taken now, we can reduce these numbers drastically from the international humanitarian perspective. In this report, we also provide recommendations of what those urgent actions and measures could be. Things like improving the systems that people are living in, so improving the strength of buildings, for example, reducing people's vulnerability to natural hazards. We also talk about, for example, scaling up early warning systems so that people can get out of harm's way when a disaster is on the way. The key message of this report is not only the large number, but that we have the opportunity to prevent that number from occurring. And so really we would like to make sure that the takeaway from this is if we act today, we can really prevent these large risks that we're facing in the future. But it does need this very urgent action, and that urgent action needs to begin with everybody, and it needs to begin today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions. First question here, and then the gentleman at the back. So go ahead.
So my name is Simon Ateba from Today News Africa in Washington, D.C. We know that President Trump doesn't believe in climate crisis. I'm just wondering, and we also know that some young Americans will shut down Washington, D.C. on Monday to demand action on, the climate crisis. So I'm just wondering if, without the U.S. on board, how far can this type of report, how effective can they be?
I apologize. We have to move to arrange a bit because this is not working. Of course, in case U.S. will not endorse the measure to protect the world from the consequences of climate change, this will have an impact, and we cannot deny it. But what we are trying to do to the presence and the role of the volunteers, it's to create a stronger engagement at community level. So what we are talking here, I said a few minutes before, we are talking about the lives of millions. And what we are talking also about is about the engagement. Those who is not the only one that doesn't believe about the climate change. So it's up to us to create, through the work of the scientists, to the professional, informing and creating engagement at community level. Those who vote can make the difference. The issue is that not too many are feeling this is is like the history that many of you have listened to in several occasions about the boiled frog. That when the frog realizes that she is boiling, it's too late. So, and this is what is happening at community level. So it's up to us, to the work of volunteers, and this is why I'm very proud about the presence of the volunteers and the engagement of the young people. So it's not about to be on the far or on the left of the political side. It's more about to be aware about the consequences and to do something. So this is not a political issue, and this is why I feel so free to talk, because, normally Red Cross and Crescent is not involved in politics. But here we are not talking about politics. Here we are talking about facts. Here we are talking about science. Here we are talking about lives of millions. So, honestly, I don't care who believes or not. I feel that it is my duty to work at community level because the people is aware. And then after, and this should be in every place of the world, the political leaders will feel that it is their own responsibility or they go home. This is not a political statement. It's a matter of fact that we do want leaders that care for the future of humanity.
This is Azim Mian from GeoTV and Young Group of Pakistan, and really highly appreciable report on climate change and victims, addressing the issues of victims of climate change. Fine. But I would like to draw your attention towards another political disaster and human disaster which is happening, and what kind of role IRC will play, and that is millions of people in Kashmir have been locked in their homes with curfews, no supplies, no medicine, no humanitarian service available there, just by one action of the politician, the Prime Minister of India. And there has been a curfew about 45 days, which is very inhuman from the viewpoint of Red Cross. So what kind of role Red Cross is going to play when they are playing the role in climate change? How about the political change and the political victims of this kind of situation? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Of course, what is happening is a reason of concern for everyone. What I can say, as a Red Cross family, we are quite complicated, but let me explain something that at the end is very simple. We have two international organizations, the International Committee of the Red Cross and the International Federation of Red Cross and Crescent Societies. This is why sometimes there is a confusion. Who is the president of the Red Cross? So I'm the president of the International Federation of Red Cross and Crescent Society that protect and engage with 100 local or national Red Cross and Crescent societies. And we work more on natural disasters, migration, and the poverty, socioeconomic impacts of the countries, in living difficulties, etc., etc., etc. There is one body which is taking care of this, which is the ICRC. I know he's working hard to find a solution and to have access to the area without taking side why this is happening, because this is not our role. For us, access is important, and I know that my colleagues are working very hard to do this.
So as per follow-up is as president of the Federation, what kind of role you will play to get the relief for millions of people who are locked up in their homes? As
I said, this is something that is carrying in this very moment is carried out by our colleagues of the ICRC in engaging with the dialogue with the governments. This is their role, their precise role. Is not up to the IFRC, which is not in any way we intervene in case of conflicts. This is our situation of extreme political tension because this is an historical issue between the two countries. We know very well, ICRC is more than aware of this. The ICRC has a delegation in both countries and is working hard to do this as usual, being present in all the conflict areas in the world. But our work on this is a very low-profile work because when you need to have access, normally you don't have to make show. This has happened the same in Myanmar or in other places of the world that are very sensitive, very critical. So this is the kind of work of the Red Cross family on this kind of very sensitive situation.
Thank you. The lady here in the middle, and you afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, Gabriela Pinasco from Ecuador. First, is the report online already, and what are the efforts that the UN and the international community should be considering to reduce the impact of multinational companies on climate change issue regarding the legally binding international instrument on transnational corporations that is being discussed right now to respect human rights and therefore their responsibility on this climate issue?
Okay. First, it is online. The report, and what is also very interesting, because this is a number on which we have that we have reached through a methodology. So you will find on the website not only the report but also the methodology to show that this approach has been a scientific one and is a very rigorous and serious approach to identify the number that we are presenting and that are present in the report. On the other hand, this is the kind of action that we do expect something new during this summit next Monday. So this is the kind of action that the political leaders should take to intervene and protect the company. So let's see what is going to happen Monday. We have been very clear, and it's a kind of hope that we all have. The Secretary General Gutierrez has been very clear, come only if you have concrete action to present. And this has been. So I hope that those who have nothing to present will stay at home and they stop to spend as humanitarians. And I'm talking, of course, not on behalf of the organization that I chair, but on a personal basis. I am fed up of a lot of wars when, as a volunteer, because I'm a volunteer, I'm not paid for my position. This is something that I committed myself to do this, visiting the ground, meeting the people in needs. You see a lot of suffering and from the so-called leaders, because they lead only political and economical interests in many occasions, you don't see any impact in the life of the people. And this is really painful. So I really welcome when Secretary General Gutierrez stated clearly that we expect concrete action, starting from my own country, of course. But this is what we do expect. Your answer is the mother, maybe, of many of the your question. Sorry, is the mother of all the question, and I do hope to find some of the solution from this kind of gathering.
Thank you. I'm Mary T. Lavelle from Kyoto News, and thank you for this briefing and your passion. I really appreciate it. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the small island countries and the Commonwealth, especially because, as you mentioned, the effects of climate change aren't only going to affect us in the future, but it's going to affect us now to the point where it's a matter of adaptability. And for small countries, especially like small island countries, especially like, for example, the humble place of Kiribati, where it's assumed that within a time's reach, the sea level is just going to rise and you can't fight the ocean. But their idea is to like build boulders around it, and they're trying their best to stay optimistic about it. But what does the IFRC, how will they approach and how will they make a room at the table for these small island countries that are already feeling the effects of it and will most likely need the most assistance in the next coming decades? Thank you.
In Kiribati, maybe as you are aware, we have a National Red Cross Society, as we have in many. The last that we welcome just last year is Marshall Island Red Cross. So we are fully aware about what the people in the Pacific is living, and it's not new. Because it's so what the sense of frustration that we are living, and I'm sure it's only 1/10 or maybe 1% of what the sense of frustration are living. My colleagues, the young colleagues that are coming from Tuvalu or to Kiribati or Micronesia, is that because the leaders and the political leaders of the Pacific Islands started to ask for attention for their own country, for their own islands years and years ago. So it's nothing new. New is the attention of the media. New is maybe the attention, what we do hope next Monday, the attention of the political leaders of the rest of the world. But what the people is living on the islands is something really dramatic, because I've seen some picture. I will visit the Pacific Island in January or February now, I don't remember, but at the beginning of New Year. But what the pictures and the news that I'm receiving from the Pacific are really dramatic. It's something unbelievable. Of course, through our network and through our volunteers, we are working on adaptation, which is the only thing that we can do at the moment, mitigation and adaptation. Then it's up to the political leaders to do something more and more concrete. We, as a network of millions of volunteers, for us the key is mitigation and adaptation and resilience, and building resilience in the community, and then trying to advocate for the so-called, again, political leaders to listen to the call of those affected by it. And this is the reason why we wanted, at all cost, someone coming from the Pacific, because you have to listen from those who are living. It's not a story or a sad story that maybe could be told by a Western man that is coming here. We want that the voice of the real people, the suffering, is listened on this, and this is what we will try to do even on the youth summit.
Sorry, just a small follow-up. Would the adaptation plan include any migration as far as getting the people to a safer place?
Yeah, of course. This is another consequence. Is not enough said. When it comes to the rhetorical approach of the so-called sovereignists. Now they tell, oh, we have to help them at their home. What are you doing to support these people in their home to prevent that they leave? Because no one, you have listened to me here talking about migration because we are very at the very forefront in responding to these also crises in the Mediterranean, in Central America, and in every place of the world. What we are trying to do, I can give you some example. In Honduras, we are working tens of thousands through the action of the Honduras Red Cross, with the support of the International Federation, changing the monoculture approach, differentiating the approach. Now they have a different opportunity in living there, and they didn't. And many of them, they told me when I visited them and I engaged with them in the dialogue to better. Some of them, they did pay the so-called coyotes, or the one that facilitate the people to move in an illegal form, the smugglers. This is the kind of activities that we are trying to do on the ground to protect those who are the most affected, the farmers, the fishermen. These are the kind of people that it's a high risk. So it's tough, of course. It cannot be everything on the shoulders of the Red Cross because it's really overwhelming. But on our national society are trying to do their best on this.
1, 2, 3, and then 4. Thank you. My name is Tetira Junaira, and I'm a reporter from Zimbabwe, and I'm also a Dag Hammarskjöld Fund fellow. As you know, the Southern Africa is going through a serious drought, and in some of the countries which have been affected include my own Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, just to name a few. And this is because of the growing adverse effects of climatic changes. I remember NASA recently put those 4 countries and that particular region on their watch list as a place to watch rising climatic changes and whatnot. So I wanted to find out from your report, like, how vulnerable are countries which are prone to climatic shocks, such as the ones I've mentioned? How vulnerable are they, and what would you suggest for governments in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, and other countries in that area to do in order to prepare themselves for those changes?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the report itself is globally oriented, so it doesn't include any specific regional information. That said, it does include a couple of recommendations which are applicable, including in Southern Africa, as well as other regions of the world. So, for example, a really important priority for all actors is to ensure that adaptation reaches the local levels. So not only does it reach the most vulnerable places as committed in the Paris Agreement, but when reaching most vulnerable countries, it also reaches outside of capitals and into local communities. Another important recommendation is that we should recover from the disasters going on today with the next one in mind. So as we know, because of climate change, instances like droughts in Southern Africa and many other hazards are on a trend of becoming more frequent and more intense. And so we should see instances like these as more likely in the future and be rebuilding, so to speak. I know there's not actually a physical rebuilding process, but recovering from instances like that with the next one in mind. And importantly, also including strengthening of early warning systems. So in the case of drought, the seasonal sort of early warning that can come to help farmers to be prepared for decreased rainfall, for example, in a coming season. This can also include, as a final point, and a really important point, also inclusive development strategies. So things like enhancing social protection systems, for example, which can also be part of building the resilience of people at a local level when these sorts of shocks are being experienced.
Yes, thank you. Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York, Radio Radicale in Rome. This is more than about the message, it's about the messages delivered. For a few years, we've been in this room, and at the UN, we had several of experts from the UN up to the Secretary General delivering the message of climate change it was delivered in a way, I think this is my own opinion, but it was not going through because only recently, very recently, we see this room, for example, full of journalists for the climate change. Before it was empty, believe me. So Monday, you say that you all say that you're expecting facts, you're expecting solutions, right? But shouldn't we expect also a kind of a language from, not only from you, you have been very passionate today, we appreciate, also from who has a responsibility to convince and to go through, especially public opinion in this country that needs a lot of headlines. Well, do you think, that's my question, do you think that the message has been delivered in a proper way or should be delivered in a different way starting Monday?
I would love to ask you all the same question because it's more up to those to the professional that work in communication to help us and they say which is the best way to reach everyone. Why is so difficult? Because this is you are very right. This is something extremely difficult to reach everyone and make the people aware. Normally, the instinct of a parent should be to protect their son, their grandsons, their granddaughters. This is the normal instinct of every one of us. So why we are not reacting when the political decisions or inaction in many cases are threatening the very life of millions of our sons, of our grandsons and granddaughters. This is I don't have the answer. I'm not a professional. I would love to have it because I would immediately use. But I really think that the key is how to deal with this. This is not mine, but I loved when I listened to the metaphor of the boiled frog. It seems that everyone we are living in this, we are boiling, and we are not finding the appropriate way to communicate with the civil society. Because if everyone would realize how big is the threat for the future generation, we would have acted like we did in many cases. Like when the people raise, when there is a risk of dictatorship or others, there is a strong reaction when something is threatening us. And this is, honestly, I don't have an answer.
The message in this report and the message that really needs to be delivered is that this is very urgent and the action on the ground is very urgent. Our volunteers on the ground are already seeing the impacts of climate change today, and we can see from international scientists when they assess some of these disasters that we respond to already the fingerprints of climate change influencing those disasters. I think that if years from now, whoever is in these positions for the Red Cross have to be in a similar situation and saying and talking about the hundreds of millions of people in need of humanitarian aid, then we will really have missed an important opportunity, and that would be quite tragic. And it's good to remember also the point that President Rocca made in the opening that this is a pessimistic scenario, but there are also things missing. We're not talking about even including the domestic costs of humanitarian response. So the costs could also be much higher than that, and that is another really important aspect of this. So this is the pessimistic scenario that we can reasonably be put forward based on the information that we have available to us, which is the international humanitarian aid system. But the urgency is there, it has been there, and it continues to be there, and we really need to see everyone investing in that local level action as quickly as possible to reduce the impacts of changing risks.
Hi, I'm Amal Ghani from Dawn, Pakistan, an English newspaper in Pakistan. So you're talking a lot about engaging with local communities in a lot of these countries. And so my question is that in Pakistan, even though a lot of people are vulnerable and facing the impact of climate change right now in terms of agriculture and changing rain patterns, but local communities are still not aware of the term climate change itself or the fact that what they're facing is because of climate change. So in communities like this, how difficult is it to talk about adaptation because they're also living in poverty, a lot of these people?
So one of the things that these 14 million volunteers of the Red Cross Red Crescent do is also help to explain the changing risks. People are, even when they live in very difficult conditions, need to know that the extremes that they're feeling now are not an indication necessarily of an unusual event, but they're more an indication of how risks are changing. In order to be able to have the most agency, to be able to ensure that you are reducing the impacts at an individual level, a household level, community level, and a governance level, you need to be aware of the fact that this risk is changing and continues to change without this sort of urgent adaptation action.
The question is, how difficult are these conversations? Like, how supportive do you find these local communities when you're having these conversations with them?
Yeah, I can speak from my own experience, having also been part of some of these conversations and working with volunteers. The conversations actually tend to be quite easy. People can already see it. They can, especially older generations, can compare it to what they grew up with, and they see that difference. And having these conversations often validates and helps to clarify what they already sort of feel anyway. So actually, those conversations tend to be quite easy.
Okay, we need to wrap up with one short question, and then we call it a day. Thank you.
So, as I said earlier, we have like 5,000 young people who shut down Washington, D.C. on Monday to demand action for climate change. Do you think that's the way forward when leaders like President Trump doesn't believe in climate change, Secretary Pompeo doesn't believe in climate change, and a lot of leaders are leading from behind? Do you think the way forward is to really take to the street and shut down most of the capitals in the world and to demand action for climate change? Thank you.
No, honestly, I think that there are many ways to show if you are pro or against something. We are talking about creating awareness. It's not about shutdown or strike. Of course, the Greta movement is calling strike for action, strike for climate, and this is a way, very powerful and engaging, especially with the young people. I'm talking about awareness. I'm talking about to reach everyone in a different way, to create a really a more well-informed community and people. It's not about only Trump or Pompeo that you just mentioned, but it's not, for me, this is not the issue. The issue is about why we are not able, the question that your colleague made few minutes ago, why it's so difficult to create this sense of urgency at community level. Because normally, even the more cynical political leaders is paying attention to those who's happening. The more or better, the more they are sovereignists, or the more they are the first one in reacting about the stomach of their community. So this is the way we used to say in Italy. No, when you talk to the stomach of someone, not to the brain or to the heart and soul. So it's by creating these informed communities that I think we can really change. And this is the one that they are using. The young people normally do. It's one of them, but it's not the only answer.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to an end. I would like to ask our volunteers maybe to stand up so people can see you, identify you, and you can speak to them afterwards. So they're there in the corner at the back. Obviously, President Rocca and Julia are available for one-on-one interviews after this as well. And the reports, the hard copy ones, are at the exit. Thank you very much.